So I've prepped my board with a base coat of lamp black through the middle and gray sky above and below. I'm going to take my 3/4 lunar blender. Now my goal is to keep this section clean. I can mask it off with tape. I'll show you, or retouch it. Of course, I'm a little shy. So I'm just going to take, and I'm not wetting my brush, I'm taking the dry brush, and I'm just going to randomly throughout here and there wet coat with a little bit of the gray sky. I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit of driftwood. Dirty brush, don't bother cleaning it. A little bristle there. So if you get a little bristle because your brush is brand new, it'll just come right off after when it dries, so you really don't have to get in there worrying about it. And I'm just going to scratch in a little of the driftwood. So it's back and forth, screech between the two of them, scratch between the two of them. A little here and there. If you get that dried look because there's not enough moisture, that's actually quite nice. So now I'm going to pick up a little bit of neutral gray. And I'm going to come through and I'm going to streak in a little neutral gray here and there. You're only gonna have a little here and there, and again I'll just grab one of the other colors. I'll go for the gray sky and just kind of soften between them here and there. We're gonna add some little kind of naughty looks into here. Create a little bit more of the look of the barn board. All dried, and I can turn my brush on the side and chisel it in a little bit if I want to work into just one area. Supposing I wanted to make a, see how I can kind of create the look of a sort of splits and knots in there. And soft, just to come back and forth. So you'll just continue back and forth with this till you get the look you like. Now, some people are going to want more gray, some people are going to want more beige. My thing is that the gray sky is going to give us more contrast from our raccoon because there is quite a bit of the beige in the raccoon. So if we have more of the gray in there, I still want to see a little of the brown in the driftwoody kind of old dried wood. So that looks pretty good to me, so I'll go ahead and I'll continue for the other side. Just lay it here and there. I don't want these to be completely even lines. These are going to be the side grain of the wood. Sometimes that grain has a little bit longer lines. The raccoon's going to be in this section here anyways. So we'll continue. And I'll just carry along. And put these little pieces in there. So they're going to give us the look. There's nothing spectacular about them. They don't have to look like anything. They're little tiny grooves in the wood. So once we have those there, I'm going to take my 1/4 inch lunar blender. I'm going to pick up a little bit of gray sky, barely any, dry brush, and I'm just going to scratch here and there. I just want like a dry scratch. You might see a little or not, and it's just 1 or 2 spots here. You know how we got that dry scratchy look when we were, and all I'm doing is just giving it the look like there's a few of the lighter fibers of wood going the other way. This is going to be so, I'm just scuffing this off on my paper towel, so barely visible, and then we're going to actually do a very soft wash over top of this too. So that's about it. It's all it's doing is calming down some of those lines, so you see some more than others. And then I'm just going to take a small flat, and I'm going to use that thin down. I wet my brush and I'm picking up that thin down neutral gray that we used, and I'm just going to, so I saved the tape that I removed. I've dried it, and so now I'm going to retape back on top of that piece that we made look like. Now it's got the wash on it, and you can see it a bit, but you're not going to see it too much. But we're going to add highlights to the other part of the barn board. So I've left my tape down here at the bottom of this line. And I just burnish it with my finger. So we're going to have a little bit of warm white. And I'm going to take my smaller, so I'm taking my 1/4 inch lunar blender, and I picked up gray sky and some warm white. And I'm just going to softly scratch a little highlight here and there. I want a fair bit of that highlight to be right above the tape. So it's a little, and I like to pick it up. Once I run out of paint, I'll re-pick up again rather than mix a bunch of it, because then that way you're going to have different strengths. And I'm hardly pressing, so I'm doing more of a scratch. So we'll end up with more of that dried, patchy look, which actually adds very nice to this wood. So I'm just going to go ahead . You can see that light highlight coming in here now. I'll just light a little bit over more for you. Maybe that'll be better. So that's pretty good. I might put a bit more here. I'm not intending on it being everywhere and equal. So when I take my tape off, I'll just test it and see if we want to have a little more. No, that could be good. I think that's all right. So I'm going to leave that, and that's the top part, and I'll continue on with the bottom part. And sometimes I'll put one right beside the other, and you want them to have a curve. You can take, if you want to do that, not quite like that. And just pull these lines in. Give them a little curve. I can even change the direction and have my slits come down on a bit of an angle. Wood doesn't crack all in a certain direction. And it will look a lot more authentic if we bring our little dragged pieces unevenly throughout our piece. So you can see how these are starting to add a little bit of depth to our. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take and I'm going to do a side load float using my number 8 or 1/4 inch, and I'm going to shade just the top edge that we applied the wood grain and the wash to. I'm just using the neutral gray, but it's going to show up a little stronger because it's a float rather than a wash. But it's just going to strengthen the edge. And it's a lot easier to do this now than after the raccoon's on, because we don't want to have to try to shade in around all those tiny fine little hair that are going to come out off our edge. Now I always like to shade paint up and water down, so I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to mix a little bit of the warm white in the gray sky. I don't need a lot, just almost a little 1-to-1 equal kind of parts there. And I'm going to float a highlight. Now I'll float this highlight and then I'll come back and I'll just kind of chisel it. I just want a soft float. All it's going to do is strengthen up the contrast. Nice and soft. I don't press hard, just nice and soft, and sweep in that nice soft highlight. And I know the raccoon is going to be there too. And then I'll just take a little of that and I'll just super fine kind of lift and chisel, just along the edge. It kind of crisps it up, but it's not outlining it. And I'll just bring that highlight back off like that. And that's good for that edge. So I've applied the tape along here so that when I'm adding my, scratching in my little base coat here, it's going to be safe from getting paint on it. Now, this little base coat that I'm putting in here, it's just a scuff mix of black brown, which we pre-mix ahead of time. It's a mixture of 4 bittersweet to 1 black, and I've mixed this mixture, it gets a little crazy here, with soft black. So I'm getting that purple tone in there. So I'm just going to loosely scuff this in here. I'm not needing it to be solid. It comes right up to the eyes. And the same thing on this side. I'm going to bring it right up to the eyes on this guy as well. There's more being done to this, but this is going to help distinguish our sections for us. It's not super visible, but it is different from the black. So it is going to give us. So this way we have a little bit of our black base in here. All right, so that's the first step. Like I say, it's going to dry and you're not going to see it. So I have made a few little markings with my transfer when I transferred my pattern on. So I have a few little white lines to the edge. So those little lines, I like to keep them visible. So when I'm scuffing this out to there, I like to still see those. Alrighty. So I'm also going to take that mix and I'm going to add a little scratching of that right up in between his nose. Forgot to put that one in. Now I'm going to use cobblestone and bittersweet, and I'm not mixing them, I'm just picking the two up on my lunar blender, and I'm going to just loosely scratch in this section. I've got the lunar blender up on the tip. I'll turn it when I want it to be flat. And all we're doing here is basing in. We're going to have some darker, we're going to have some lighter. We're going to use our liner, and we're going to be using our comb. But this I'm basing in for our background section. And you see how you can still see black through there? I'm not base coating. Let's call this base scratching. So I'm just scuffing this in to get us the areas so that we're able to see. This one comes right down to the nose. So that's cobblestone, bittersweet. I pick up the two. It may end up different every time you pick it up. That's all good. Even up here now, I do not need it to be black under here. That doesn't matter. A lot of times when we've used tape, you may get an edge there. If you feel like you can see an edge, you can just do a light sand with sandpaper. And I just want to scuff this one into this one. We'll be defining all of these with more scratches afterwards. Pick up a little more. And it reminds you when we did the wolf. So I'm just scratching this down here. Not concerned if I can see the lighter through it up top. We'll be working with that. And there's just a little bit at the edge of our dark there. So that's a good enough scratched in coat at this point. I'm going to take my 1/4 lunar blender with eggshell, and I'm going to just scratch in a base coat. Again, this isn't needing to be solid for the ears. And then I'm going to also scratch in the base coat coming for the muzzle. So we're just gonna, this is just putting in a background coat. It's nothing that has to be extremely solid. So there's going to be a little bit coming up. And I'm going to scratch that in. And it just heads off into that basic area. Okay, so that's eggshell. We're just, like I say, we're just setting in the background where we're going to have the colors lightened. I can fill that a little heavier right next to the bridge of the nose, and that's good for that. So we're going to base coat with the black brown lunar blender, and I'm going to fill in the section of his inside of his ears. So that's with the black brown. It's fairly heavy right in the middle. And then I'm just going to use the chisel of the brush just to scratch a little bit of the back side of the ear. And because I'm using the chisel of my brush, it's letting it just come down to a nice little point there. So we've got that section in there. All right, so I will pull a little dark around the base edge. I'm not wanting it to be too much, like so. I'm going to take what's left on my brush and just come in here and scratch in. And I'm lifting and scratching as I'm pulling my way down so that I'm only having a little bit of the dark in there amongst that mixture that we had put in there. So it's just putting a little bit of dark in, because we have black in behind it down below when we did our base coat. There. We're going to, I'm going to just work that same kind of messiness back down into here. We're going to be putting really fine lines on afterwards with our comb and rake. This just pulls the same look down in there. All right. I'm going to clean my brush. And I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of eggshell, really work it in on my palette. I'm not looking to have tons in there. Give it a little scrunch even. And I'm going to come in here, wipe it out a bit more than that. Just with the chisel, soften some of those see-through lines. Clean my brush off, and I'm now going to pick up a little bit of cobblestone. I won't be needing much. So I've cleaned the brush off, I've picked up some cobblestone, and I'm just going to scratch a little cobblestone right in there where the dark brown, black brown meets the eggshell of the ear. It's one of those things I'm just want to get a little dirty there. It's not going to be too much, and I'm going to put a little of that at the top of the muzzle as well. Could I have a bit more on my brush? I'm going to pat it off on my paper towel so that I don't have a thick, heavy, wet brush of it. That's good. All right. I'm going to take my dry brush, my 1/4 inch dome stippler, and I'm going to pick up some of the black brown. I'm going to pat it off on my palette. I'm going to bring that over here. So I'm just going to pat it off on the palette so there's not much on there. Scuff it onto my paper towel, and then I'm going to very softly. So what I'm wanting to do is kind of just dirty faint bit out onto the eggshell part of the ear where we've got the cobblestone kind of rubbed in there. So again, I'll do it over on this side. You never want to have too much paint on the dry brush or it's going to fill it in. We want to see through, we want that powdery blush kind of look to it. And I'm also going to take, and I'm going to do a little of that by the bridge of the nose. It's not much. So you see, it just kind of just deepens a little bit of the shadow look. We're going to pull little hair out into these areas. I think I'll put a little bit down there as well. Right at the base where the two colors are meeting. So it's not so bright down there. Okay, so that's the dry brushing. And when you're done with your brush, you want to make sure that you give it a little scrubby off to clean off. I'm going to take my lunar blender, my 1/4 inch lunar blender, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of the soft black. Remember, we used soft black and black brown, and we did this section in here. So I'm going to pick up a bit of both of those colors again. I'm just going to brush mix them together. I'm not really going to mix them. So brush mix those together, and I'm going to get a little bit of the cobblestone, and I don't need much. What I'm doing with this is I want to be able to define faintly a little bit of a highlight. So do you see how that's going to define his jawline? It's more just for ourselves to be able to see it. I can just wisp a few little markings back into there. I'm going to take that also and kind of come along underneath his eye. Just give him a little bit. And I'll just scratch that out. So this is, again, this is a little bit of cobblestone with soft black. So we're giving them a little bit of a highlight coming out there. And you can just kind of, with the brush, the tip of the brush will give you those little bits of scratchies that kind of fade out into there. So So all of that just kind of scratches right out. There. I can take that same brush now and scratch a little bit of the lighter. So this is implying a little of that lighter fur. I'm going to pick up a little more on my brush. Just a little bit. That's good there. It's a little visible, a little bit lighter, and that's good for there. So we're going to work on his eyes. I've mixed a tiny bit of neutral gray into soft black. And I'm going to side load on my number 6 flat. And I'm going to shade just a tiny soft little float there on his eye. And I'm going to turn my brush and just put another tiny bit right there. So there'll be a tiny bit here. And on this eye here, I'm not going to put anything down in that corner. I'm going to take just soft black now. And I'm going to shade just a little bit underneath the eye. The soft black has a little bit of a purpley brown in it, so it does a nice effect. I'm going to take a nice fine liner that I just went and put away. I'm going to haul back out. And I'm going to take a neutral gray and I'm going to do a nice fine eyelid. And on here, we're highlighting the one on the top. A little bit coming in and a little swipe there. I'm going to mix, or just brush mix, a little bit of soft black into the neutral gray. So just picked up the two with my brush and just kind of stirred them together on the palette. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dirty brush. I'm not going to clean the brush. I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of eggshell. So I'm going to take the dirty brush that has the neutral gray with a bit of soft black, and I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of eggshell. Just dirty brush mix them. I'm just wanting to lighten this up a little bit, and I'm just going to add a couple of tiny little highlights on there. And then I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of bleach sand. I just want to bring these highlights brighter gradually. I'm not looking for really, really bright. And I want some of the dots to join so they become the look of a little bit of a highlight glistening line. And I'm just going to take a little of that eggshell one and add a little bit more of a light highlight on there. Clean my liner, and I'm going to add a little just neutral gray. So just neutral gray, and a little line of a highlight there. And a little, like I don't want these bold. I just want them to have a little tiny bit of a highlight. He's quite in the dark there. His little eyes are very beady and we want to keep them dark. This side is quite shaded, so that works not too bad. All right, so that's for that step. So I'm going to dry brush some black, lamp black, in this area using just my domed stippler. Scuff it off on your paper towel. And I'm going to dry brush in that area. So that just brings, I'm going to put pardon me there, and I'm also going to, I think ahead of what I'm doing here, I'm also going to put a little bit dry brushed up inside of his ear. Okay, so why don't I just try a smidge right in the middle of his, where I've got the soft black brown mix. There, that's creating quite a bit of nice depth there for him. And I'm just going to toss that in the water. Black is pretty hard on your brushes, so it likes to stay for a while. And I'm going to use my 1/4" lunar blender. Could have had it out ahead of time for you. Thought I did. Welcome to my world. I have misplaced it. Oh, no, I didn't. It's sitting right in front of me. Okay, so I'm going to take this lunar blender, taking a little bit of eggshell, scuffing it off on the palette, and I'm going to just kind of, I'm not pressing hard. I don't want to fill it in to be base coated, but I just want to wisp in a little bit of the fine little bit of scratchy hairs coming up in here. I am going to use the comb or rake, whichever you've got, to add a little bit more, but right now I just want to put in a little bit of a background for it. So I'm just going to scratch in a little stronger. It's going to define his little chin there a bit more too. That's good. Gotta love these lunar blenders, I'm telling you. Now, we want to enhance the little bits of hair that are on top of this section here. So I'm going to take my comb or rake and I'm going to take a tiny bit of driftwood and my soft black. So I'm going to use my comb or rake. I'm going to pick up, I'll slide that over a little bit more for you, pick up some soft black and some driftwood. Gives us a little bit of a pinky tone. I scrunch. See what I'm going to do? I'm going to twist it open so it's going to splay open those bristles nicely for you. Camera really jiggles quite a bit here. And we're just going to, just nice and softly, I'm not touching hard. I just want to apply a few. I'm going to get a little more moisture on that brush. Scrunch. There. A little more moisture will let a few more strokes come out. We're not looking for too much. We just want to delicately highlight coming from here. Wipe my brush. I'm going to get a bit more moisture, and I'm going to pick up more driftwood. Scrunch again. So it's still dirty brush, but the driftwood is going to be a little brighter. And then we're going to just kind of nice and softly come from there. I want them to be short, little tiny, very delicate. You never want them to be completely in a line. So these are heading up this way, the little hair are going that way, and these ones here will gently start to, and all this really is a high, we're wanting this to be a highlight on his little face. I'm going to put some black ones in amongst those, which is, we dry brushed a bit of black back over here, but in this section it's the brown there. So now if I use the brush doing the same, I need a bit of moisture in there, scrunch it, and then I can put a few little tiny black ones in there too. That's gonna break it up, and I'll just blot that so you can see, because it dries down for you a bit there. It looks just nothing but shiny. And when it fades off into the black dry brush, you won't really see anything. There, you've got some little bit of highlights that you can see there. Now I want to get a little bit of a brown tone, so we're going to go raw umber. When I find it. Now we're talking. So we want to get little bits of brown in here. He's a dirty guy. So I've got raw umber, and I'm going to just take and bring a few little highlights, and then once I tint my raw umber with a little bit of driftwood, we're going to have a little more of a brownish look. And we want to have these nice fine, I totally need more liquid. Now we're talking. I want some light brown, fine light brown lines. Coming from his chin line. And these just wispy little hairs will overhang our dark down here. And that's gonna... I want to show you something that I don't know if you remember back when I was doing these wood grain lines, and I smudged a little bit there. This brush is called a fix. Let me get it under the camera there for you. Here we go. This brush is called a Fix-It brush. It's a Princeton brush. It's stiff, a little pointed. So I'm going to take and show you how we love this brush. I didn't do it right away when I was there because I was at home and this was at the shop. So I wet the area and I use my little Fix-It brush and I go in there and I rub back, take a little paper towel, and I take that smudge off of there. Right here where I've come over a little bit, I can even take this back. I would have worked the ear out and brought it out more. And what you want to remember with this is I'm scrubbing the direction of the grain of wood. This piece is on a wood, so it's going to have a direction in there. So my paint is going to have filled in the direction. I'll go in circular motions. If I scrub too hard, I can remove it right down and take the base coat right off. So I always stop, take a look, see how I'm going, wet it again. I'm not, it sounds really like I'm scrubbing hard, but I'm not. This brush is, see how I can divide things? This is absolutely amazing if you're shading something and you don't like the strength, or you've got what I always call track lines from your brush. You had either cross-blended onto dirty paint on your palette. You can take this and just nice and softly erase back that shading to a point where you're happy with it. It can calm your shading down. It's a wonderful tool, very much worth investing in. And it's called, if you could see under all this paint I've got on here, it's called the Fix-It brush. Wonderful, wonderful tool. I would recommend getting it for sure.